District of Conservation is sponsored by the Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, better known as CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thanks for listening to the program. Welcome to District of Conservation. I'm your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. Happy New Year, District of Conservation listeners. Welcome to 2026. We are kicking things into high gear, not surprisingly, with how we do things here on the show, talking about the most recent or the inaugural or perhaps reintroduced bear season in Florida with none other than my good friend Travis Thompson of All Florida. We're going to break down the controversies or lack thereof controversies entailed with the bear hunt, why this is a conservation success, and we're going to talk about conservation New Year's resolutions. Travis, welcome back to the program. Why don't you remind my listeners what All Florida does if they're not familiar, please?
Thanks, Gabby. I think if I'm looking back over podcast history, this is like the 6th calendar year, you and I will have done a podcast together. I was thinking about that the other day. So long time we've been intersecting each other. But so All Florida, we work on conservation issues across the state of Florida, not just sportsman's issues, although we do work heavily on sportsman's issues, but ag issues, ranching, timber, land conservation, water quality, coastal habitat, et cetera. So we kind of are a big net, and we often partner with a lot of organizations that I've heard on your show on a number of issues up and down the state. So we've been doing this for about 3.5 years. I've been doing it a little bit longer, and just love our state. And then I also work with the International Order of Theodore Roosevelt, some friends of yours and mine who've been on the show before, doing constitutional amendments for rights to fish and hunt in various states. So we work together, obviously, on Florida's, and now we're working in Ohio, Maine, and some other states coming this year, hopefully.
Yes, you were pretty integral with Florida becoming the 24th state at a personal level and with your involvement with IOTR. So I think people don't know that you and a handful of others were really hustling to ensure that Florida has that because of things like attacks to the bear hunt, which we'll go into momentarily. But conservation, I think, is still top of mind for a lot of people, which is why I like to bring you back to the podcast. I think Florida, it's not exactly ground zero, but it's a reminder to those of us in states where we have right to hunt fish amendments, where we've never really had attacks to hunting, to remind people that, yeah, your politics might seem pro-sportsman, but maybe it's not. Or perhaps, like we're learning here in Virginia, we have a new governor, we have a trifecta, which might not be friendly to hunting. I'm a little nervous to see what would happen. I hope we don't see incremental bans to hunting here in the Commonwealth. But I think Florida is a good case study as to why it is important to have these protections. Virginia, we have these protections here, of course, but they could be dismantled. Maybe not so successfully when you already have a right to hunt and fish amendment, but there will be attempts. But Florida passed that for this very reason, especially with respect to now you guys having the first bear hunt, or I think there was probably a bear hunt maybe around the time when the Wildlife Agency was established, or was there never a bear hunt before, Travis? Like, give us a history.
There was a bear hunt the bears were stopped being hunted. That was a terrible sentence. Bears were no longer hunted as of the early 90s. I think it was 91.
Okay.
There was not a bear hunt.
My birth year.
So there you go. In your lifetime, there's been one bear hunt prior to this year. That was in 2015. That bear hunt, depending on the lens you look at it through, was either wildly successful or an absolute outrage, and was stopped after 2 days. Opponents of the bear hunt say it was stopped after 2 days because it was a bloodbath, a massacre, etc. Proponents of the bear hunt would say it was stopped after 2 days because the quota was hit so quickly that we had to stop it to ensure we did not go over on the number of bears harvested. So depending on the lens, I think there were some things we learned, some lessons learned in that hunt that could have been done differently. The agency would not bring the bear hunt back in 2016. The commission voted against bringing the bear hunt back in 2016. So we've not had a bear hunt in over a decade until this year. So it's kind of a landmark moment for Florida and for hunting in that the bear hunt was brought back. So we just completed it. At the time of this recording, I think it was finished about 2 days ago. And FWC released some preliminary data. 52 bears were harvested out of 172 tags that were issued. And we can dive into this however you want to, as much as you want to. But I'm really proud of how this went. The hunt I really am embarrassed by the attention given the anti-hunting radicals, and candidly, to kind of bring it politically, I think some of our politicians in the red state of Florida, and I'm talking as a conservative to a conservative, but we're conservationists. I don't love some of the attention that some of those folks get, both at the state and federal level, and so that's concerning to me to look at. And we could get into ESA protections, and if you look at the ESA, some of the Republicans that defected, two of those four are from Florida. So our Republicans don't necessarily align with sportsmen's values, and that's concerning to me. And I think some of that's an educational opportunity for us to sit down with them because they didn't grow up hunting or fishing, and so let's sit down and make sure they understand the values that this brings to conservation.
Let's break down what this specific hunt, the landmark hunt, was. So you said there was about 150 some odd tags issued. What is the current bear population? Because they would not, wildlife biologists, as everyone knows, who has bear hunted or has hunted in general, biologists are going to set a quota, especially when a species is being reintroduced or perhaps rehabilitated. We have this with elk in Virginia. We have an elk lottery. We don't have a, free for all season where it's you shoot however many. It's only 5 and 6 with an additional raffle tag, excuse me. So how many bears currently exist in Florida, and why did the biologists choose this number? Because it was correlating to the population. They said this would be a healthy amount. And explain why the quota of bears harvested is not going to decimate the wild population or the wild bear population.
Yeah, so there's a number of data points that go into Florida. Florida does holistic wildlife management a little bit better than any other state that I've heard of. I don't function at the state wildlife agency level in a lot of other states, but something we did recently in redfish was we changed from looking at one data point for redfish numbers for harvest of redfish to using, I think, 7 or 8 data points, including water quality, habitat, algal blooms, things like that. So we started taking other factors besides just what we termed escapement rate or size of the fish. So if you factor that into how we're doing bear management, it's not just about the population study. So we know that at the last available data we have on population was about 4,000 black bears in the state of Florida, which is the most in settled history since Hernando de Soto got here or DeCava got here. 4,000 bears is the most there's been. So when you think of Florida and you think of the growth and development and everything that, so many people complain about, for black bears to be reestablished is such a conservation success story that everyone should be swinging from the rafters cheering on. Like, good job, state of Florida, in bringing this species back to a huntable, sustainable number. 172 tags were issued on a population of about 4,000 bears. Other data was included in kind of making that determination. So the state's broken up into what we call BMUs, or bear management units. And this is based on something we do with alligator management units, or AMUs, for how they determine the subpopulations within the state as it kind of moves around. And so there was actually a change. Initially, I think it was 187 tags were supposed to be issued. They reduced that to 172 because 15 black bears, they reduced the number of tags based off the black bears in the North Florida Bear Management Unit. And because that bear management unit, bears don't know where the state line is, many of those bears in a drought condition like we've had shift their range back north into Georgia. So the irony there is, with these bear advocates going out and yelling, you shouldn't be able to kill them, you shouldn't be able to kill them, look what they did. You can go across the state line and buy an over-the-counter bear tag to hunt the same population of bears in the state of Georgia. This was all just kind of a PR boon for the anti-hunting folks, but really a conservation success story. So we were taking that data, we were taking what are hare corrals is what they call them, where they have like barbed wire and they get a bear, as a bear crosses it pulls a little bit of hair and they're able to do DNA
I
swap.
did that in Wyoming with Madison for our bear report. Yeah. So I've gone into
that video.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's more than just the last population count. There's other data, the number of bear incident phone calls and like when you roll all this stuff together, the scientists sit down, and as you know, because you deal in the actual conservation world, population dynamics is complex. It's not how many were last year, they're going to produce this many this year. There's all sorts of factors that go into this. So they sat down and they determined that they could take 172 bears across 4 of I think there's 7 bear management units. So 4 of them had a bear hunt. 3 of them did not because they didn't meet the thresholds that the scientists and agency set. And that 172 bears, if all of them were sows and 100% success occurred in the hunt, which is, as you know, almost impossible, the population would have stayed static or grown. So there was no scenario wherein if you took all 172 bears and all 172 of them were sows, there was no situation where the population was going to decline based on the hunt. So safe to say it was a sustainable resource being managed well by one of the premier agencies in the country in a way that just outraged people that are anti-hunting and don't understand conservation. That's really why so many people want to talk about this all the time, is because those people kind of control the mainstream media, or the mainstream media really likes to give them a platform to talk about it on.
Correct. That's because of the stranglehold of animal rights activist groups. But if you really come down to the weeds of, let's say, black bear populations, let's look at the total population in North America, including the United States. There are hundreds of thousands of black bears. And so the reason why we have a hunt is they're not on IUCN's list. They're of least concern. That doesn't mean, one day if there was bad management practices, they could disappear. But right now, as it currently stands, because of largely the contributions of hunters working with wildlife biologists, their populations have rebounded. And I saw this, Travis, last year, as you know, and listeners know, when I did a bear den study. I waited 5 years to do this. It was wonderful to wait for that experience, to see this kind of confluence between hunting dollars from Pittman Robertson to that of the bear den study, which funds this and keeps this population and this species in perpetuity, keeps them healthy, checks them. What I think, before I ask you about what were some of the media characterizations of the hunt, what people forget is, if you are seeing a bear, let's say, first off, a sow with her cubs, you don't hunt that. Everyone knows that. And you don't kill cubs. That's unethical. You don't do that. They're too cute too. I mean, we as hunters can think they're cute. And also we have ethics where we don't do that. That's also important to know. But everything about bear hunting is scientific. And there are people who poach and they try to make a bad example of this form of hunting. But anyone you meet who's a bear hunter, every bear hunter I have met, even anecdotally speaking, is the most careful, conscious, smart, practical person. They work very closely with their wildlife agencies. I have a friend, Joe Candelas of it used to be Western Bear Foundation. Now they've called themselves the American Bear Foundation. And he was in our conservation country report out of Montana and Wyoming. And those people care very seriously about the health and the continuity of black bears, grizzlies, not so much polar bears, because we don't deal with that here in the lower 48. But you don't see more dedicated advocates of bears than bear hunters.
It's crazy to me because I get how it's counterintuitive, but if I want to hunt a species, I need to ensure that species is there for me to be able to hunt, and not just one of them so I can go hunt at one time in a sustainable, renewable way. I don't care if it's rabbits, whitetails, squirrels, bears, quail, whatever it is, ducks. As you know, I'm a big waterfowl guy. I want as many ducks on the landscape as I can so that on any given day I can shoot up to 6 ducks. I'm not looking to shoot all of them in some kind of commercial market type hunting. I'm looking to take what is mine, and that is ultimately conservation. Like, this is the district of conservation. And I think I've said this on your podcast before. Conservation is about seeking the proper use of a resource. You talk about energy all the time. You talk about, like, we can get really into the nuance of some of, any administration's policies, because conservation is not keeping it from being used. That's preservation. Conservation is about seeking the proper use of it, whether it's timber, natural resources, or wildlife resources in this case. As I said, we're not looking to diminish. In Florida, we're not looking to drive the bear number down. We're happy with how many bears there are. And in fact, there might be too many bears in some areas because nuisance calls have gone through the roof. Particularly, you look at the Panhandle area, there are people up there that are really concerned because bears are so damaging to property. That doesn't mean we abandon Bearwise programs where we go and we educate the public on how to secure their trash and how to, those are all incredible programs. I'm supportive of those. But hunting is a good, useful tool. And if at some point we need to decline a population somewhere, hunting is the first tool that we should use to do that, because it's conservation, because that bear is not just being shot and left to die or left to rot. That hunter is going to take the skin, they're going to take the fat, they're going to take the meat, they're going to utilize every part of that animal. The outrage over this. So let me set the table a little bit here. In the first hunt in 2015, I forget the quota, but let's say it was around 300 bears was what we wanted to take out of the state. we wanted the harvest number to be. So they issued some number of tags above that. Let's say it was 1,000 tags. I don't remember the exact number. Again, I don't have these in front of me. When they hit the 300 bears, they shut the hunt off. So you may have been given a tag, but not able to fill the tag. It's not uncommon in a quota hunt type situation where you want to hit a threshold. What that does is if you want to take a bear, you need to take the first viable bear that you see, the first big bear you see, so you saw more sows taken in that hunt. You saw a couple of folks that took bears that were probably too small. I forget the weight, 100 pounds, 80 pounds. There was some threshold of weight. There were a few bears.
Generally over 100. It can't be under 100 in most states. Yeah.
So there were some bears taken under that threshold. In those cases, citations were issued. I don't think that was an intentional, hey, let me go kill a little bear. I think it was, oh, I'm excited. There's a bear. Let me shoot it. Because the impetus was, if you didn't get into that first 300 or 320 or whatever the number was, you weren't going to get a bear. What the agency did was they heard the concerns from the anti-hunting community and even some of the moderates in this conversation of, we don't like the idea of lactating females being killed or smaller bears being killed. So they removed that impetus to kill the first bear you saw by saying, we're going to issue 172 hard tags. That's all we're issuing. And so what we saw here is you were able to take, if you got a tag, you were able to take the full 3 weeks to hunt. So we may have even seen some tags go unfulfilled because on your camera at your property, you've got one big bear that you're trying to hunt and a handful of sows around, and you're like, I really want to take out that big boar, and you end up never pulling the trigger because you keep waiting for him to show up and he doesn't show up. So you're going to have some success decline, but that's a hunter decision that you get to make in how you hunt the bears. There's not the impetus to say, oh, there's a bear, it's big enough, I'm shooting it right away. So we changed the way the hunt looks in this hunt. 172 hard tags, that's all we issued. What the anti-hunting community did is they came, and I hate calling them community because, but what the anti-hunting radicals did, the anti-conservation radicals did, is they came in and bought, I think they ended up, the claims I saw where they spent about $2.5 million, something like that on
a common tactic. They did this for the grizzly bear hunt that was later shut down by the federal judge in Wyoming in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So this is a common tactic, yes.
And then once the tags were issued, they actually offered $2,000 to any hunter that would sign a contract with them, not to, and now they're claiming X number of hunters did it. And I'm like, look, name them. If that's the case, quick cloak of darkness stuff. Like, we have to do everything in public record, sunshine law. Name them. Tell us who those hunters are that sold their tags. Because in my opinion, those hunters shouldn't be eligible ever to apply for a tag again.
Agreed.
Like, Travis's opinion. Not sure how you'd handle that legislatively or rulemaking wise, if it's even possible. But then we ended up with the media coming along and saying, because they're listening to these crazy anti-conservation radicals, the media came along and bit on their hook, which was, we're not getting a daily report on how many bears were harvested. Well, no duh, because we know the cap on the number of bears that were harvested. In the first hunt, we needed a daily report because we had to monitor when we got to the 300 bear threshold. In this case, we know that no matter how long it takes, 172 bears is all that's going to be killed. And why no one in the mainstream media can either wrap their head around that or they just don't care and they want to push an anti-hunting narrative baffles me. And you asked, that was a roundabout way to answer the question. You asked, what am I seeing in the media? Bear Warriors, the Sierra Club, Humane Society, they go to the media and they say, well, why aren't they doing this? And the media grabs it like a dog with a bone and just runs with it. And they'll pick up the phone and have a conversation with me and they're like, oh, that makes sense. And then they run the freaking article that is exactly the opposite of what we just talked about. And I'm like, are you dense? Are you stupid? Or do you have an agenda here? And all I'm coming down to is they must have an agenda wherein they want to push this.
They absolutely do. And I think it goes back to the idea that the black bear is a charismatic megafauna species. And like I mentioned before, they are cute. They're adorable. They're cuddly. They belong in the landscape. But what people forget is that they have to be managed. Let's turn the media narrative actually on the flip side, Travis. You've probably seen that story. I think listeners were clued in looking globally, Japan. And everyone has been reporting on this. And they've even made the concession that a bear hunt has to be implemented in Japan because the population, I think it's in Hokkaido, the island of Hokkaido, has become crazy. It's chaos. People have been attacked by black bears, which if you look in North America, they are usually the most docile, less aggressive bear of any. Grizzly bears more so than them. They can be aggressive. Of course, we've seen black bears in New Jersey attack people when they get too close for comfort. But in Japan, of all places, I have never seen actually quite favorable media coverage and even the admission that there will have to be a bear hunt. So I'm hoping some of the international groups that we know, like SCI, CIC Wildlife is a great outfit, globally speaking, the American Bear Foundation. I hope all those groups will go to Japan and help advise them about how to set a bear management season, because they need it there. I think it was over 100 attacks, which is unheard of. So fascinatingly, in like CBS News Morning and a couple like mainstream media outlets actually did a fair report and said that, yes, hunting will have to play a role into this. But domestically here, you're right, Travis, and it is captured, sadly, sometimes even on right-leaning media, because people don't want to touch this story. Fox News has talked about hunting in a respect, but I think they might be a little afraid to talk about bear hunting too. Maybe some show someone is very sympathetic to the animal rights cause. And maybe we could move into this. You talked about even conservatives buying into or perhaps being influenced by animal rights causes. I don't see that happening federally. What I do see is that like individual members of Congress or state lawmakers who are being captured by these interests, perhaps because you said they don't have exposure, may have not had involvement in hunting, or maybe they're just like their leftist counterparts and they just hate it. So we do have to educate conservatives too. And I am glad always to see, I think conservation should be nonpartisan. I know plenty of people on the left and in the middle who are avowed hunters, conservationists. But when we're trying to talk about conservationist conservative, when I'm trying to appeal to a conservative audience, like you try to do too, beyond, talking with people in general, we do have this hurdle. So speak to that a little bit. You don't have to name names, but I think that's also a challenge sometimes in red states. Like I said, not nationally, but I do see a little bit of that pushback to hunting sometimes from Republicans too, a couple individual members.
Well, and I think this is where Florida becomes ground zero a little bit for this conversation, because if you look at an organization like Ducks Unlimited cracked the code years ago that if you work on habitat, you actually improve on ducks. I don't view Ducks Unlimited specifically as a sportsman's organization anymore. I view them as a conservation organization, because what they're trying to do is protect wetlands, improve wetlands, make more wetlands. We have more ducks, then everyone benefits, whether you're a bird watcher or a hunter or not. So I'm not saying they're like not a hunting organization, but they're more of a conservation organization. I think Nick or Adam or any of those guys would be comfortable with that. They're sportsmen, to be clear. Just like I'm a sportsman in Florida, but I work on conservation issues. So I like that generalization. So I say all that to say, I think when you look in Florida, we are so passionate about land protection. We have such a growth pressure because Florida is like everyone wants to live in Florida. Gabby, you want to live in Florida. Everybody wants to live in Florida. So, and I like to live in Florida. I'm not jealous of that. I get why you want to live here. So we have such a pressure on land protection because it's almost like a land race, and we are protective of private property rights, which means we have to create incentives for a landowner to not develop, whether that's ag incentives, fee simple purchases, outright purchases, or easements, which are a tool that we use pretty frequently here, where you're able to keep cattle on it, run hunting leases on it, et cetera, and have revenue streams tacked, but you sell the development rights off that property. So rural and family lands, which is one that our Commissioner of Agriculture does, is one of the most successful conservation programs in the country. But where I'm going with all this is also we have water quality. Right? You talk about the Everglades and discharges, and we get all these narratives around what's going on with water quality. So habitat becomes way more important than take does, than consumptive use does. Consumptive use kind of gets lumped into, well, if you're not in on the habitat conversation, there's not going to be any animals for you to take, so it's not going to matter. And so where 25 years ago, those were sportsmen leading those conversations. Now they're environmentalists leading those conversations. And an environmentalist can be a conservationist. I know plenty of environmentalists that don't hunt, but they're fine with hunting, that they believe in timber use, or they believe in ranching or ag. I think what I've seen here is kind of a capturing of what I would call the eco right, to where we only talk about habitat, carbon,
emissions.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about those things. Like, they're important conversations to have. But if you dismiss the consumptive or impactful use that is part of conservation, which goes back to Aldo Leopold, the plow, the cow, the axe, the match, and the gun. Those are the 5 tools of wildlife conservation. They have gone unchanged in 100 plus years. And they're going to continue to go unchanged because there's not something somebody can hit me with that doesn't fit into one of those 5 buckets. I think that is a real concern for me because I see a detachment for people from where their food comes from And even looking at the bear groups in Florida, many of them identify as conservatives. They are registered Republicans on paper, and they are putting pressure. Now, they're completely aligning with non-conservative candidates and non-conservative politicians. It's like they've tried to find this little place where they're gonna vote for them. And I don't know if they are conservative or not. I don't believe they are, because I don't know how you could identify as a conservative and support these types of policies. But I also see a little bit of capturing of some politicians by this eco-right movement that has no tangible connection to consumptive or conservation use in habitat, in land management, and et cetera. And that is concerning to me, because they're going to turn around one day and they're holding a liberal policy, is what I think, because there has to be some kind of generated revenue. Like, that land has to produce something. We can't just say, like, ideally, if we lived in a Narnia,
No.
okay, let's just go spend $150 quadrillion and protect all the land in Florida.
For
right?
no uses, yeah. I don't agree with that, yeah.
I don't either. But like, if we lived in Narnia, I like wild Florida. Like, let's go protect. Who then gets to determine what the use is on it and what the use isn't on it? And should we be able to take a natural resource? Like, can we go take a snapper? Can we go where's the line on what you can or can't take? So the North American model of conservation is critically important. And I feel like there's a detachment from that among lawmakers. And I feel like that gets even further apart when they get into, well, we can just align with habitat protections. And that gets us the environmentalists and the sportsmen. And we don't have to pay as much attention to the sportsmen. So we can court some of these eco-right folks that have no interest in consumptive use. And it kind of checks us and leaves us by the wayside, which is why the work you do is so important. The work that I alluded to with IOTR does is so important. The work that Theodore Roosevelt Action Committee does is so important, because we're trying to say, look, we are conservatives and we are conservationists. Like, we care about these natural resources. If something's not right, we're going to say it's not right. But we're also like, we agree on most of these policies, and we understand that you've got to use natural resources. We're humans. We're going to have impact on this land. And if you went back 250 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, Native Americans were having impact on the land. Like, they were utilizing resources. So I just think this is weird conversation that's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle around, particularly in Florida, land protection and habitat protection, not marginalizing it. But it's important to remember consumptive use, ag use, ranching, et cetera. Those are the tools that are going to keep things wild. And we have to ensure those exist.
Human impact can be positive. And I think in the last 50 years, of course, I'm not in my 50s anywhere near that right now. But what I've been able to observe, just like casually looking at trends or how situations used to be 50 years ago, there was no innovation in this. You had probably far more poaching. The land was not perhaps that highest quality we see today. And even kind of with this contrast of, I know with Florida overdeveloping, or Virginia is becoming very pressurized too. A lot of states are. There is kind of interest, even amidst kind of development, to maintain and to see, wildlife there. Like, for instance, I get wildlife in my backyard all the time, and we're pretty suburban where I live. And I have foxes, I have deer. And even if you have development, I think nature can outwit us and be smart and adapt. Even with a lot of construction. And I'm not saying we need to overdevelop or have, everything, every stretch of acre built on, because there are lots of places that are sacred that should not be developed. But that doesn't mean you're opposed to any type of economic progress or some smart, sustainable building. I'm not a NIMBY or YIMBY with that respect. I believe in abundance, but I think abundance can be done very judiciously and carefully and not, alienate people. But I want this to kind of springboard into a final point, Travis. This might be part of your kind of conservation New Year's resolutions for 2026. So what would you, as someone who helms an organization like All Florida, this could be relating to Florida or even nationally, what are some of the resolutions or hopes and goals that you would like to see in conservation, going off of what we talked about, carried out in Florida or carried out nationally, that you don't already see so far?
Yeah, the one thing that I see that I think is going well, and it's partners like IOTR, it's partners like Howl, it's partners like you, is this authentic conversation around, as a conservative in this space, sometimes it's difficult for us to speak truth to power because you don't want retribution. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on there. Like that as you go up the tree, kind of like there's an inability or a fear of disagreeing. And I think highly of our leaders. I think our leaders are capable of being disagreed with well. And so one of my goals in 2026 is to continue, and we've done this somewhat in the past year. Like you and I talked some. I was not 100% on board with the location of Alligator Alcatraz, but that didn't have fallout. I disagreed with our governor. I disagreed with on the location of it, not immigration reform, on the location of that particular facility. I was able to disagree well and continue to move forward in the conservation space. And that's kind of inspired me to say, in 2026, we need to find better ways to disagree well. We saw it last year with Senator
public lands debate. I was opposed to that. Even on a professional level, I was talking to my higher ups. I said, we don't want to derail the one big beautiful bill, but I cannot support it if it includes this provision, as it says. And thankfully it was removed, because it would have removed or perhaps tanked the prospects of getting rid of, subsidies for unreliable energy sources. So that was the greater goal. And I think members of Congress realize that. So I disagree better. And because I think I agree with 85% of what most of the leaders currently in charge are and, advocating for. And I think it's fine to have healthy disagreement. It makes us stronger. Like I've had no pushback from the admin. They love that. Like, at least we agree on the big picture things.
Well, and to put a bow on that a little bit and go further into my conservation goals, like I've noticed grifters grifting really hard, particularly Florida, like around politics. And it drives me crazy because these people what they do is they go find one bad decision or one thing they disagree with, and they just talk about it ad nauseum. And so you could have a politician out there that has done 70 great things and 3 that you disagree with. I'll take that all day, every day. Are you kidding me? Like, I don't understand. But that's where they get their run, and they make it into this controversy and this big deal, and they never get into the nuance. It's like the umpire at a baseball game. You notice when they miss a call, but you don't notice that they get 54 other calls exactly right, including balls, strikes. Like, you watch it back on computer replay, and it's like, wow, how did that guy catch that? Or he got the tag in and he called it right. Do they get some wrong? Absolutely they do. But by and large, they're like 99.8% accurate. I really think in 2026, with the advent of AI and how we're seeing more and more stuff, it creates a culture of distrust a little bit, because is that picture I see of a duck real or not? Is that picture on the internet real or not? So I think authenticity is going to become a more real thing. And I think with that, the idea of disagreeing with authority, well, I'm not just saying disagreeing for spite or disagreeing to disagree or be contrarian. I'm saying being able to disagree well, and the ability to have more nuanced conversations. Those are goals that I've kind of got set. We've got a lot of stuff we want to get done in Florida around land protections, around more land being protected. Again, I'm going to mention our Commissioner of Agriculture, Wilton Simpson. I think since the last Commissioner of Agriculture, he's increased our land protection 280%. So you've got a guy that was a champion of our Amendment 2 right to fish and hunt, but also here we sit and he is doing a tremendous talk about not being captured by the eco right, but doing the right thing. He's doing tremendous land protection, but also looking at consumptive use, looking at ag, looking at cattle, looking at all these tools that need to be used in conservation. Man, that's a thing that I want to celebrate, protect, and champion in 2026. And I think that's a really big deal for us.
It was you and a handful of other really important people, players in Florida, who reminded and demonstrated for us that cows help keep Florida green, and how this connection and kind of confluence of cattle and conservation go hand in hand. And even beyond that, as you said, with consumptive use or active conservation practices, wise use of natural resources. We do that better than anyone else in the world. And I think we're a model. Europe is hopefully starting to borrow from us. I hope people in Asia, especially Japan, with their bear management problem, they look to us too. South America does this pretty well in particular countries near the Patagonia region, Chile, Argentina. They believe in conservation. So we have a model here. It works. Of course, we have pushback from the animal rights advocates. But I think even with AI and their kind of stranglehold on media, I don't think they're going to succeed, because science has to win out here. This is a very scientific movement and very scientific industry where everything is decided: population, environment, control factors, et cetera. And you can't we can be emotional about the animals. And I'm emotional when I see Virginia elk, being rehabilitated. I get emotional for that, but that doesn't mean my emotions are going to guide my thinking. with conservation. So I think you could have both, but they lean too much on emotion, and that leads to disaster in places like Japan. Travis, as we close out, where would you like to direct people to learn more about the bear hunt, all Florida? Please list those links if you can.
Yeah, you can follow me at Travis Thompson, just my name, TravisThompson. You can follow All Florida, ALLFLAORG on social media. And as you've had them on before, make sure to check out our partners, IOTR, I think it's at IOTR_official is their Instagram handle. So Kenya, who runs that, she's been on your podcast before, incredible hunting advocate.
Great group. And Kenya's wonderful. We love Kenya.
He's in Florida right now. In fact, I got to go figure out take her fishing.
Love it. That is so fun. Tell her I said hello. But Travis, as always, this is a wonderful conversation. We always have really kind of big picture, wonky conversations. And I appreciate all that you do. And I wish you a successful 2026. I hope to come back to Florida. I've come back to Florida, but only for business in the very urbanized areas. But I'm hoping to come out, hopefully go duck ranching, maybe do some turkey hunting or axis deer hunting with Matt Pierce. I know they offered it once before. So I hope that'll be my resolution to come down to Florida more, to actually go outdoors. So thank you so much. And we'll direct everyone to IOTR, All Florida, and your personal links in the show notes. Thank you, Travis.
Thanks, Gabby. Happy New Year.
If you enjoyed this installment of District of Conservation, I would love to know your feedback. Send it my way. Please be sure to leave us reviews on Apple, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are played. And also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat nor a guest announcement. Thanks so much for listening to District of Conservation. I hope you have a wonderful day. And please share the podcast to those who may be interested in learning more about these critical natural resources, environment, energy issues.